Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for Monday the 6th of March, and joining me on this edition, our assistant editor Steve Withers.
For God's sake, Denham, leave the native alone.
News editor Mark Hodgkinson.
Monsters belong in B-movies.
Audio reviewer Ed Selley.
I'm not a coward. I ain't going to run.
And special guest star Mark Botwright.
Boobies?
Welcome back to the podcast. I don't have anything for Phil's intro. It just says Phil's intro. Normally there's a dash and something to talk about.
I was expecting you to ad-lib a bit there.
I've got ad-lib, so what you should put is dash ad-lib, and then I know what I'm doing then.
Maybe with a question mark to make him do a Ron Burgundy moment.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Well,
Phil Hinton.
You know that I just read directly from what's on here. So, Mark Botwright, what's happening with your life?
Yeah. Lots of things.
Still alive?
No. I've bought a new set of attachments for my cordless vacuum. That's very exciting in my life.
Oh, right. Perhaps I'm going to regret asking this, but what was wrong with the attachments as supplied with the vacuum cleaner that you felt compelled to go out and buy more of them? I've never felt sort of hard done to by the ones that came in the box.
Well, first of all, it's the little cordless Dyson.
Right.
And honestly, buying that vacuum has been close to, it was like an epiphany.
Is it the V6? Is it the V6 Animal?
No, I didn't get the Animal. I just went with the standard V6. Now I want to upgrade to the Animal.
Yeah, I want to upgrade mine to a V8 now. I've had the I've had the V6 for a while.
Boom tish.
No, it's honestly just the case. It only comes with the little one at the end and the small nozzle, and you get the little bendy one in the attachment set and the one to do your car with and lots of things like that, and do upholstery and your bed and stuff. And I know it's very, very sad, but damn it, I like vacuuming.
Well, we all have our guilty pleasures. I occasionally derive some considerable satisfaction from ironing something really well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not that I iron very often, but if you're doing it, you've got to do it properly.
You see, the problem I have with the V6 Mark is that if you put it in a turbo mode, it lasts 3 minutes and then it's done. So the battery doesn't last very long in these things. Even in normal mode, I think I can stretch it to about 9 minutes, the continuous use, and then it's dead. And
so it's like Apollo 13, but with a vacuum cleaner.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what are you having to use the turbo mode on here?
Carpet.
You shouldn't need that. I mean, not unless you've got, pets or a lot of dirt in there. I should think regular mode should do you fine.
Yeah, it's the type of carpet it is. It's a very thick weave. So it takes quite a bit of effort just to get a hair off it, to be honest.
All right.
What's wrong with the proper Hoover?
Who has a proper Hoover these days? You've got to plug it in. You've got to fight with the cable all the time, and it never reaches where you want it to reach. It's too wide. You can't get it into thin places. Whereas, and hoovering out the car, well, you can forget that with a full-size Dyson.
Can I just say, I need to clarify this correction. My cleaner has to plug it in, lug it up and down.
Well, obviously, Ed, we're paying you far too much money, so.
Agreed. Well, I've had this conversation before. I know what my hourly rate is. I know how long it takes me to clean it. The cleaner is cheaper. There you go.
I'm just imagining the Family Guy episode where he gets the maid for a week and he rides her to town.
Yes, I don't think I'm going to try that with my cleaner, if I'm honest. But can I also just say I hate my Dyson. I think it's wildly overrated as a piece of design. It's riddled with flaws, and I much preferred our older vacuum cleaner, even though it had a bag. Horror of horrors. Every now and again, it had to be changed, but except that when you change a bag, it just comes out as a neat bag, as opposed to tipping a load of crap all over your bin. So
some people combine the two. My dad used to just reuse the bag and empty it.
Ooh.
So, yeah.
No, you can do that. We used to do that. Recycling.
I was just decadent. Fresh bag each time, me.
Living it large.
I get that from you, Ed. You're a fresh bag man. I get that.
Not anymore. I miss the bags. Miss the bags badly. But can I'm sorry. Brand loyalty's here. Miela, however you want to pronounce it, poos all over Dyson. Okay, they don't come in a range of funky colours, but they are better in every single way. No question.
Are these cordless?
I have no idea. I'm sure they do a cordless one. They do everything else. The only thing is that it all costs a lot of money, but then it appears to be immortal. I mean, I won a tumble dryer, a Miele tumble dryer in a raffle when I was 5, which was really disappointing because I
What?
wanted.
Still raffle.
I wanted the electric
I
go
want a
kart,
tin of soup.
which was the
Electric
third.
go-kart and tumble dryers. You went to far better quality raffles than me. I got a bottle of high karate.
Well, suffice to say that I won this tumble dryer. There's a photo of me collecting my prize with tears streaming down my face because I wanted the go kart. But that thing, to the best of my knowledge, my parents left it when they moved in 2000 in an older house, and the last time they checked, it was still going. Just it's the Toyota Hilux of the white goods world. Incredible thing. Whereas let's not forget, Dyson made a washing machine for about 9 minutes, and it leaked like a sieve. It failed on the fairly crucial point of keeping the water in the machine.
Well, we know what our picture will be for this week's podcast. You sat on the tumble dryer crying.
You are not. No, absolutely not.
Oh, you've got to give us that photo now that you've discussed it.
That is not happening. There's not even money will change hands for that. Well, no, everything's for sale for a price. Suffice to say, there's not a sum of money you're likely to give me where I'm going to part with that photo. So there, it'll just have to be a nice photo of a Miele tumble dryer.
I'm with Ed. I've always thought Dyson were overrated, overpriced.
I've got to say the full size. I was going to call it a Hoover there, and that's a big mistake that everybody makes because Hoover's a brand. It's a vacuum cleaner. Yeah. The full size one, I didn't get on with it. I didn't think it was particularly good. It didn't do a very good job. Whereas the cordless one, fantastic. It's just the battery life doesn't last very long, so you got to keep charging it up.
Couldn't you rig up some sort of external, using the Osmo flight batteries that we've got? Could you not give yourself the ability to hoover cordlessly for anything up to sort of an hour at a time?
I find that 9 minutes is usually enough to give it a quick once around, and then if there's any areas that need extra attention, it's a recharge, and then I've got 9 minutes to work on it. So it's not that bad. Plus,
and
it's
the out of context award for the podcast goes to that.
Plus, it comes with this really neat wall hanger with the charger built into it. So all you do afterwards is just, I don't know if you do this, Mark, with yours, but you just hang it back up and it automatically charges as you put it into the holder, and it holds it out of the way as well. So you're not losing any floor space to having to store it either.
Yeah. Can I just say that by this point, our listeners are going, God, I miss Star Wars or Fords.
Yeah. We've severely gone off topic here.
Once you get 4 guys in their 40s, what have we got to look forward to in life?
Can I just say I can get very, very... I do find I get very, very, overly excited about white good features when selecting fridges, ovens, etc. But look, this one's got 4 defrost modes, to which I will then use none.
Yeah, but Ed, you've got a family where things explode and need to be cleaned very quickly and clothes flung into the washing machine probably twice a day. Whereas the white goods I have in my kitchen, they only service me, and have lasted. Well, the tumble dryer's a decade old, and the washing machine is about 15 years old, and neither have gone wrong.
No, our washing machine runs pretty much constantly, and one of my wife's pupils, he's one of 4 kids, and his parents have 2 washing machines just to keep up. Which is, let that be a salutary warning for you all.
What has the podcast come to?
I just want to take some of these things out of context. So you got Phil saying they only service me, recharge it, and you're good for another 9 minutes.
Yeah, it's a good job I've got the editing job here. So I don't know where that came from and how we ended up there, but there you go. There's the AVForums advice on hoovers and washing machines and tumble dryers. Yeah, go on.
That's the last time I let you ad-lib an intro.
Well, see, you've learnt a valuable lesson there, Steve, that on the running orders you always give me some bullet points to talk about, like who's died this week and so on. Right, so let's go to competitions. Hodge, tell us all about it.
Okay. You can win Quarry, the complete first season on Blu-ray. I have no idea what that is. I just don't know if it's any good. And that's it.
No, hang on. You can't win that.
No, 3rd of March.
No, you can't win that, sorry, because it's finished, isn't it?
Yeah.
We haven't won any competitions.
Right.
Hodge,
okay,
Hodge, tell us what we can't win.
Can't win. You definitely
McLaren
can't win
F1.
Quarry on the complete series unless you've got a time traveling device, because it's closed as we're recording the podcast.
I think if I had a time traveling device, there's far
Got
better things I'd be doing.
It's not the first thing on the list necessarily.
Ray's Sports Almanac, here I come.
Yeah, but that runs out in 2000. That's no good. Previous competition winners.
Oh yes, we've got lots of those. We've got Kevin 7 Sub, and he won Deepwater Horizon on Blu-ray. And then we've got GD 2007, who won the Warner Brothers DVD bundle. And Richard K won the Lego Batman merch bundle. And DHM won Kubo and the 2 strings on Blu-ray and the Leica? Is that right? Leica DVD box set.
Okay. With the name Kevin 7 Sub, hopefully you have got some decent subwoofers and a decent sound system. If you have, you're going to get blown away by Deepwater Horizon.
Or indeed a fascination for underwater stuff.
Yeah.
Equally appropriate.
Yeah, that could be right, yeah. But anyway, you're going to get blown away with that. Best disc out there at the minute, I think, in terms of not only image, but that soundtrack is just unbelievable. It's well worth a listen. Right, let's move on to some hardware news. D&M Group, Denon and Marantz, didn't appear to be in any financial trouble, didn't appear to be doing too badly, just ticking along there, but they've been bought out, Steve, by Sound United.
Yeah, who aren't a football team, although it does sound like they might be. I don't know whether this is necessarily because D&M are in financial trouble. I think maybe it was more of an interesting fit. I know they've Sound United, by the way, for those who don't know who they are, and I'd never heard of them until this week. They own Definitive Technology and Polk Audio, and I believe that D&M have done some distribution for them previously.
Yes, with Boston.
Yes,
Boston loudspeakers and so on. D&M did carry them for 2 or 3 years as part of their portfolio.
So they have a pre-existing relationship, and I do think it's a reasonably good fit because the two companies do different things. I mean, predominantly, you associate D&M with things like AV receivers, amplifiers, and wireless speakers to a degree. So they have things like HEOS, the multi-room system. And obviously, Sound United's portfolio is predominantly speakers. So I think actually it might be a very good fit. And so I don't know whether it's necessarily that they were in trouble as much as it might just be, a sort of...
well, normally if a company is in trouble and what, there's rumours out there and people have got stories, and I haven't heard any of that about D&M. So, like you say, I think it's just been a really good fit. It adds to a portfolio that's pretty strong in terms of brands to start with. So yeah, it's interesting that's taking place, and we'll look forward to, because you're going to be spending some time with D&M in the next month or so, aren't you?
It would be end of May, yeah. So I guess we'll get the full SP at the end of May in terms of what's going on. In the meantime, though, I've currently got their X4300 AV receiver in for review, and that's excellent. But it's going to be a while before that review turns up because I'm not around much.
No, March seems to be a month of press trips. You lucky son of a gun.
Yes, one press trip after another.
We'll get the SP on that when it comes to the end of May. We've got some product from them, and the product's been really good. I've seen quite a few bits and pieces as well over the last couple of years, and they're still a strong brand. They're still putting out the goods and really good in terms of build quality and sound quality. So let's move things on. Let's go to Mark, because there was a couple of announcements from MWC, Mobile World Conference, which is held in Barcelona every year, and it's always entertaining on Twitter, following whose backpack's been nicked. Seems to be a big problem with people getting mugged in Barcelona for some strange reason, and there's always 2 or 3 victims every year where they get their laptops taken and all the rest of it. But there's been some interesting news, Mark.
All centering around UHD and HDR, really, predictably, with the screen technologies that are knocking about. First of all, we got LG. I think it was actually Sony first said they had an HDR10 capable phone, and then it was shortly followed up by LG and Dolby issuing a statement saying that they had incorporated Dolby Vision into LG's upcoming flagship phone, which is the G6. And it's also HDR10 capable, and it was confirmed that streaming services, including Amazon and Netflix, will be delivering 4K HDR direct to mobile phones, which is quite a thing, I guess, on a 6-inch screen. I don't know how much I really read into all this. I'm certainly not excited about it.
It's a bit of marketing, really, isn't it? If you look at it, it's and again, it's interesting. It's being delivered via software. And HDR10, well, HDR10 has to exist before Dolby Vision can exist because it's part of the core. But yeah, again, it's one of these marketing things. I mean, it's LG again at the forefront with Dolby. They really are buying into Dolby at the minute. But do you need it on a 6-inch screen? And what difference is it going to make, really, to the image?
I think it's only a matter of time before they stick Dolby Vision on one of their washing machines, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's going to be.
Probably.
It's only a matter.
I think the colour of this as it comes out.
Yeah.
But is it 10-bit or 12-bit colour?
Yeah, quite. Yeah, putting a little bit of blue in there to make the whites look whiter, which is what they actually do, isn't it, in detergents?
Yes. If you look at a box of Daz these days, you see the little blue.
Little blue dye in it, lots of blue dye. The Ultra HD Alliance. Obviously, they were talking about that at IFA last year when I met with them. They had this in the pipeline. Their mobile HDR premium specification. I noticed they essentially seem to be mirroring those of OLED because these phones use OLED screens, so that kind of makes sense. Whether we think there's any benefit, I think, is a moot point. I think the reality is that there's a whole generation of people who watch content on phones and don't watch it on TVs and projectors and even monitors. They watch content on phones, and that's just the companies align themselves with the fact that is a growing marketplace. And if you look at the statistics for streamed content to mobile devices, it's absolutely massive, and it's going to be even bigger over the next 4 or 5 years. So it's just the way of the world, unfortunately. But yeah, I see absolutely no point in watching a film on a mobile phone. But I think I'm probably outdated in that sense.
It's quite telling because we're the type of people, Steve, that you sit on a plane, and most people are quite happy just to sit and watch films on a plane. But we'll go through the list and we'll say, "No, I really want to see that one on a disc. No, I want to see that one on a disc. I'm not going to watch that because I want to experience that on the big screen." But yeah, I think it's the way of the world nowadays, isn't it? I mean, there's lots of consumption of content on these smaller devices, and it's a nice bit of marketing for Dolby and LG because once again, it was probably the only story that really for our audience that came out of Barcelona. I mean, it was quiet otherwise, apart from the Nokia 3310, which was again another great bit of marketing for Nokia. It got them everywhere. In fact, I saw that story.
First time in decades.
Yeah, it got them all over the news media. So it was a good bit of marketing from them. But yeah, is it a case
good for everyone all round though? I mean, obviously it's just marketing, but if it drives further creation of 4K content and betters the streaming services overall, doesn't everyone benefit?
Oh yeah, totally.
It won't do any harm. It's just a negligible amount of viewing good it'll do, to the end user, really, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, you're getting projectors released with HDR on them, and to be honest, it's not a patch on proper HDR, and the same will be the same for the mobile devices. I mean, if it improves image quality, then great. And that's one of the things that we've always pushed is if it improves image quality and it gets the image quality looking a lot better than it is, even on a 6-inch device, then great. Yeah, all for it. But the way that this has been announced and all the rest of it, and the fact that it's LG and Dolby again, it's obviously marketing driven. To be honest with them, it's the one story that stuck out for our audience.
Yeah, Dolby getting the name in the news and job done, I suppose, isn't it?
I think Dolby have done an extremely good job of promoting themselves, both in terms of Atmos and Vision over the last few years.
Yeah, well, they have been around for 40 years, 50 years. So they've got a lot of experience behind them in terms of getting their and they've been burnt in the past as well. So there's a lot of pressure on them to get it right as well because they missed out on Blu-ray in terms of being the default soundtrack that crown went to DTS. So there's a bit of momentum there for them as well to do really well in this market. So yeah, big brand, everybody knows Dolby. So they're just going to do well there, and like I say, marketing wise, they seem to be on a roll at the minute because people want Dolby Vision without even having seen it. So if you've got people, and if you just have to look at our forums to see that, so if you're managing to do that without any product out there in terms of end-to-end product, then your marketing team are spot on. I want that marketing team working for me.
Call me when it's on a Dyson.
Yeah, I noticed we mentioned Daz in the middle of that. This really has to stop, guys. We're too white goods this week. Anyway, so moving on. Let's go to Steve. You've been looking at the first Sony TV of the year.
Indeed, first Sony and well, I was about to say first TV of the year, but technically, I suppose I did review the Philips POS 901F, although that was meant to come out last year. Yeah, first Sony TV of the year for us, and an interesting product, this one, because when it was announced, along with their other rest of their lineup back at the beginning of February, this one caught a lot of members' attention because it's the XE90, and this is a mid-range Sony TV. It's below the XE93 and the XE94 and the ZD9 and the A1, sort of flagship models. But it has a direct LED backlight, which is relatively unusual in a mid-range Sony TV. So you've got a direct LED backlight and also local dimming as well, which means you're going to get a lot of the benefits you'd get from, say, the larger ZD9, the more expensive ZD9 and the more expensive and much bigger XE94, but at a much more attractive price point. So I've got the 65-inch version, and that retails for £2,500, which, is not short change, but it's a reasonable price for a 65-inch direct LED 4K HDR TV with local dimming. In terms of its design, it's very similar to last year's model, so a very attractive TV, very minimalist in appearance with that attractive brushed silver metal sloped stand at the front. Has plenty of connections at the rear, 4 HDMI, 2.0B, I assume, because it will have HLG added to it later in the year. It does support HDR10 out of the box, but it uses, and this is one of the big differences between this TV and the more expensive TVs in the Sony range, it uses the X1 processor, not the X1 Extreme processor. So it won't be getting a Dolby Vision upgrade later in the year. So please bear that in mind if that's something that you feel might be important to you later. Doesn't obviously support 3D, as do none of Sony's TVs this year. Oh, their new TVs this year, the ZD9 will support 3D, but that's obviously last year's model. And it includes Android TV as well. And I've got to say, for the first time, I have not had a single crash. It's been a very robust platform, so hopefully that means that Sony have been tweaking the operating system and delivering it in a more robust manner than they have in the past.
After 2 years, you would hope that is the case.
Yeah, well, you'd think so, but
it's Android 6 now, isn't it? I think.
Yeah.
Which is most...
No, are we on Nougat now?
Are you on 7? Is it on 7? I thought it just gone up to Marshmallow.
No, it's Marshmallow. Thank you. Yes, that's it's Marshmallow. It is more robust. It's more stable. It's more responsive, and I found it to be a much more pleasant experience than I did previously. I've often found in the past that whilst I've absolutely loved the image quality of a Sony TV, the whole idea of having to use the Android smart platform has completely put me off. So this is the first time where I thought, this is actually a platform that I could now use and I find to be enjoyable as opposed to being just frustrating, which it was in the past. So that's all good news. Picture quality-wise, overall, a very impressive TV, I have to say. As is often the case with Sony, as is the case with all Sony TVs, there's no CMS, but the color tracking was excellent regardless. A little bit too much blue in the picture initially, but that was easy to fix with the white balance control to adjust the grayscale. The number of local dimming zones is quite small. I counted it at 20. So, you're not talking about the 636 on the ZD9 here. It's very limited in terms of number of zones. So you do have the direct LED backlight. You do have a very bright image. You can deliver over 900 nits on an HDR 10% window.
VA panel?
But, it's a VA panel, yes, and the black levels are excellent natively. You get 0.03 nits on a zero IRE window, and you get zero basically if you engage the local dimming. Local dimming does work, but there is definitely a lot more, not a lot more, but there is more haloing apparent on this model than you would see on the more expensive models with the increased number of local dimming zones. So there is a bit of haloing. That's obviously more apparent the more you move off axis. If you're sat directly in front of the TV, it's very good, but as soon as you start moving off axis, it becomes quite obvious that there's haloing. And that's obviously down to the fact that it's got a limited number of zones, so you're going to get that. But the interesting side effect of that is that if you're watching a lot of football, you don't get the banding that you get with these TVs with lots and lots of LEDs behind the panel. There was none of that banding that's associated with a lot of the direct LED TVs with a lot of zones. So actually, that's a sort of a nice side effect of the limited number of dimming zones, is you get a more even overall image, and therefore you don't get this kind of banding backwards and forwards when the camera's panning across the pitch. So good news if you're a sports fan, and also good news if you're a gamer, because it has a game mode for both SDR and HDR, and it's 32 milliseconds input lag, which is pretty low. So overall, I think if you're a sports fan, a gamer, if you're looking for a good quality direct LED TV with local dimming and HDR and 4K and all those things, and you're not worried about things like Dolby Vision, then it's definitely a real bargain. Even at £2,500 for a 65-inch 4K TV, real stonking performance.
Can I just ask, is it likely to be a VA panel across the range for 55 inch as well, or is that something we don't know?
I'm pretty sure that the 55-inch will use a VA panel as well. It tends to be when you get to the smaller screen sizes, and I think sub 50 inches, where sometimes you occasionally get some variations in panels, because obviously they buy in these panels from multiple different manufacturers, and sometimes there are variations within a range. But my experience of 55-inch Sony panels that I reviewed last year, they were all VA. So I would be surprised if it wasn't a VA panel. Are you thinking of buying the 55-inch version, Mark?
Yes. Where I'm going to put it, it's sloped roof. So should we say, unless I change TV stand, it's a case of, I think the 55 is going to be pushing it for me. I'm very interested in this one.
One thing I would point out, actually I forgot to mention a second ago, is like the XD93 from last year, it uses a power adapter. So there's a normal 3-pin plug goes into the power adapter, then there's a cable that goes from the power adapter into the TV. So if you're thinking of, say, wall mounting, you need to bear that in mind, Mark. But I think from your perspective, for watching, I don't know, you a big sports fan?
Yeah, I will watch any amount of football, any amount of snooker.
Right, well, I think you'd find it great for that. Good for gaming, a nice low input lag. You can game in HDR and SDR and use the game mode as well. So I think from all those perspectives, it'll be a cracking telly for you.
Well, this is the thing. It is the fact that I'm kind of in between, in that I went to plasma and then one died, and then I went back to kind of got Sony LCD at the moment. I think the 2014 range, and I found the motion handling to be very good on it. I've got to say the Sony motion handling has very much pleased me. I was considering going towards maybe B6, C6, LG OLED, the kind of lesser models, because they can be had for kind of lower prices now, and it seems like they're kind of getting rid of them before the 2017 range hits. However, the one sticking point, well, two sticking points. One is input lag, and the B6 not getting the update for that for the HDR game mode yet in the UK, though that's supposedly still coming. But the other is still question marks about the motion handling on it. And that, very much worries me, because it's a case of one of those things where once you see it and you become very aware of it, there's no real way, if you're watching, say, a football game or something like that, to stop seeing, should we say, certain things there. Yeah,
I think of all the manufacturers, if you're talking about motion handling, particularly with fast-paced sports and football, for example, Sony definitely are, I think, the top manufacturer in that respect.
I agree with that.
They do, yeah.
Of course, you could go for a projector, Mark.
Been down that route. I went down the projector route, but absolute laziness stopped me, I'm afraid.
Like most things, I should imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just one of those things where you just think, it's going to take me 10 seconds. No, I won't bother. TVs.
If it's any consolation, I watched Deadpool for the first time on Sky Movies, even though I owned the Blu-ray, because I spent more than 5 seconds looking for the Blu-ray remote, couldn't find it, and just went back to the Sky box.
I've got to say, I find it, because I've got a separate room, which I should be using all the time, I find it a chore just to think, I'll have to go and switch the projector on and warm it up, and I can't be bothered, I'll just sit here.
That's exactly what I was like with a separate room. Also, I found the thought that, particularly in winter, I'd go, it's going to be cold in there. It'll be a different temperature. I can't be bothered.
Yeah, I think it's just laziness, and sometimes it's the time of night, because sometimes I'll look at it and I'll think, and this is me getting old again. If it's 9 o'clock, I won't start watching a movie at 9 o'clock. It's too late to finish.
You won't make it to the end before you fall asleep.
That's as much symptomatic of the fact that films are now preposterously long. You could watch a good, solid 80s action blockbuster, because that would come in at 90 minutes, 10:30 off to bed. But, modern stuff, well over the 2-hour mark. I completely agree.
But you see,
I actually find myself doing that, by the way, checking running times, thinking like, cheeky 90 minutes, I can get that one in no problem before I go to bed. It was like 2.5 hours. I'm like, no, I'm not watching that. There's no way I'll make it to the end.
But if it's something I want to see without falling asleep, actually, that's when I go into the dedicated room, because it's got really uncomfortable leather chairs. Like one seat are really, so and you're sat almost upright. I mean, you can lean back a little bit, but if I want to make it through to the end, whether it's a TV series or a film, I go and watch it in the dedicated room. Because if I watch it in the living room, I'm lying down on a couch. Within 10-15 minutes, I'm asleep. Guaranteed.
This is
We've all
actually
been
this is a subconscious plea for help, isn't it, from all of us? We are riddled with first world problems right now.
Yeah, we are.
Right, Mark, Wetek Play 2, I think it's your second or third attempt at reviewing this. On you go.
Yeah, well, it's definitely not white. It's black. So there you go. Bit of a change of subject. Yeah, the Wetek Play 2, I'll make this quick, is the follow-up to the Wetek Play, which was a hybrid Android media player with a TV tuner. And this is pretty much the same thing, but less frustrating. It's very similar to the tiny little Wetek Hub reviewed late in 2016. But you get 2 gigabytes of RAM with the Play as opposed to the 1 gigabyte in the hub. As I kind of alluded to, it's just a very basic plastic box. As Phil will testify, it's very dust attractive. It features an HDMI 2.0 output. It recently had an update to the user interface, which makes it much more like the Android TV experience Steve has just been experiencing on the Sony. I'm not a big fan. It's just not as nicely implemented as official Android TV lean-back launcher. But you can go back to the more minimalist classic Wetek launcher if you prefer. It's better featured than the majority of Android boxes out there, and that's because Wetek supports it well with a good firmware, regular software updates. So there are a couple of really good features in there. There's one that allows you to mount network storage at operating system level, which is really, really handy if you're using it as a media playback device for NAS stored media, because it just makes it seamless and very, very simple to hook all your content up. And for AV fans, it features an automatic refresh rate switching app, which is active on every app available. So it works on Netflix, YouTube, Amazon, anything you care to mention. It works and switches to the correct frame rate, which is generally a desirable thing. Although with YouTube, that's a bit hit and miss. But you can select apps to switch it off for, and it does make a big difference. And also, as opposed to the majority of Android boxes, it does Netflix all the way up to 1080p. And if you run, there's a custom firmware about that actually is very much similar to Android TV, the Leanbot launcher, and that will allow 5.1 Netflix at 1080p, which is an improvement over the 2.0 output on the basic firmware. You can also run a dual boot operation with LibreElec, which is a just enough operating system which runs Kodi, basically just with networking and features just to make it work as a device, and it runs it really, really well. And so you can choose to boot into Android or LibreElec very simply just by holding the power button down. It's, in terms of media playback, it does virtually everything you want it to. It does 4K up to 60 frames per second, HEVC 10 bits, decode, although it plays it at 8-bit. It's for 3D, just to wrap up that bit, it does HD audio pass through and high-res audio formats as well, which is not something we normally test, but it does actually play back those because of the chipset. It doesn't do FramePack 3D, so if that's a consideration, then there are better boxes for that. But generally, its performance is really, really strong, and it kind of lives or dies because of its price tag by its live TV and PVR function. So there's a WeTV app, which is Wetek's own app, built in, which allows you to tune in the Freeview channels or the FreeSat channels, or whatever's available in your area via satellite or aerial. And the integration is pretty decent. It's certainly a lot better than the original Wetek Play. You get a not particularly pretty EPG. Setup is a little bit more complicated than your basic standard PVR, like for example a UV box, which I compared it to. But the picture quality is really good. The de-insulating capabilities are really strong. But I mean, one of the most attractive things for me is it allows you to store send recordings to a network storage, which means you can access them from multiple devices around the house, or your phone or your tablet or whatever. And that's really, really handy. It's not quite as smooth an experience as I say. It was a dedicated PVR and I wouldn't want it as a replacement. It's a single tuner for a start, and it's just not as sleek. But as a secondary PVR and a network recorder, it's really, really handy. And overall, it's something I'd recommend, specifically if you want these live TV and PVR functions built into one box with the rest of your media hub activities. If you don't need that, then you could go for a hub or any other decent media box in that price category. So yeah, all in all, it's an accomplished box that could perhaps use being a little bit slicker on the PVR side of things, but yeah, it comes recommended.
Okay, cool. And I guess that kind of wraps up the hardware for this week. We've gone over time again. We've got a habit of doing that. So coming up next is movie news. So we're into another month, and I'm back to minus 18 on the unlimited card. So what can I go and see at the cinema this week, Steve?
This week you can go and see, if you so wish, Phil, you can go and see Logan, which, as we mentioned last week, is the final Wolverine film by Hugh Jackman, and also the final performance by Patrick Stewart as Professor Xavier. I saw it on Tuesday night at an advanced screening, and it is excellent. It's a very, very different kind of comic book movie. It's very much grounded in reality, aside from the mutant aspects. It's got a lot of swearing in it, and it's very, very violent, which I think the swearing bit I found slightly disconcerting, because it felt like they were just swearing for the sake of it, because we can swear now, it's an R-rated movie. Whereas the violence really added to it, because Wolverine is notorious for being a very violent character in the comics, and in the movie version they never really had a chance for him to let go and go full berserker because of ratings issues. Where in this he does, and there are arms and legs and heads being lopped off all over the shop. But the performances are brilliant, and it's a very grounded film. It's a film about the end of things coming to an end. And there's a certain they do actually allude to certain other films, particularly the film Shane, quite appropriately. And I thought the performances by Hugh Jackman and particularly Patrick Stewart, I thought was superb in it. But it is full of some really strong performances in it. The little girl in it's also very good, and well directed by James Mangold. And I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think it is a fitting send off, both of those characters, and therefore it works. Well, Kaz gave it 8 out of 10. I'd say it's about right, 8 out of 10. I've seen some people giving it a 9 out of 10. I think maybe it doesn't get the 9 out of 10 because whilst you don't need to have seen X-Men movies to enjoy this film, it does seem to exist in a world where you don't know what happened before in it, and so there are some questions that are left unanswered about the context of the film. But I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think Hugh Jackman is superb, and it's a very, very fitting send-off for him in his 10th and final X-Men movie.
Steve, just a
Yes.
quick weird question, and we need to do this without spoilers because we were critiqued a little bit about this last week. I've noticed, obviously, Stephen Marchant is in it.
He is indeed.
Now, does that work? Because, I mean, as far as he is a superb comedic actor, as well as, physicality in comedy, effortless timing, so on and so forth. This obviously doesn't strike me as a laugh a minute. Does it work?
It is not a laugh a minute, although there are a few laughs in it, many of which are provided by Stephen Merchant, who is surprisingly good, I have to say, in a dramatic role.
Right.
Yes, there's a comic element to it, but I actually thought he was very good. His relationship with Wolverine was excellent, and initially, almost unrecognisable, by the way, I have to say, in the role in terms of the way he appears. Yes, he don't worry, he's good. He's good.
Cool.
Enough.
That's all I need to know.
Okay, so I'm still at minus 18, Steve. So what else is opening this Friday?
There's quite a lot of films opening this Friday, many of which we have reviewed because Shireen has been going to an awful lot of press screenings. So there's a bunch of movies that she's seen. These are kind of small independent films that are coming out this week. So The Love Witch, which is A, got a great title, if nothing else, and B, having seen some clips from it, they've really gone for a 60s Technicolor, Roger Corman kind of look to the film, which I've got to say does pique my interest. There's also a low-budget thriller called The Chamber, and a low-budget, I'm not going to say chick flick, but it's called Catfight, and it stars Anna Hesh and Sandra Oh. Have not seen it yet, don't know much about it, but I know that Sharina absolutely loved it. I thought it was brilliant. But the big release this week is obviously going to be, on Friday, is going to be Kong Skull Island, which is, as the name might suggest, a King Kong film set on Skull Island. Apparently takes place in the 1970s during the Vietnam War, or just after the Vietnam War. It takes place in the same universe, apparently, as the Godzilla reboot that was made by Gareth Edwards a couple of years ago. It's got an interesting cast. It looks like fun in the trailers, although Laura read out the Peter Bradshaw review of it from The Guardian to me this morning, and he thought it was terrible and absolutely hated it. But I, for one, will give it a go.
See, that I can go with that one. I'm going to go and see it. Mainly because I absolutely love the original Kong, and then I've got a real soft spot for Peter Jackson's basic love letter to that film, which was his version of Kong. Although it's overly long and outstays its welcome, I can watch it in little snippets, and I think it was brilliantly done. This I have my worries about this one, but I'm going to go and see it anyway and see what it actually turns out like. But looking at the trailer, it looks like all the best bits are in the trailers, and there's not a lot of acting, which I'm always worried about when there's not a lot of acting in a trailer. So I have my worries about this one.
It looks like it could be fun, but it also has the potential to be a bit of a turkey. So we'll find out when we get a chance to see it. But the early reviews have not been good. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, okay. But then I'm £10 up now if I go and see that one. So next, what's coming out on Blu-ray?
Blu-ray, the big release this week. There's two out this week. One is a small Western starring John Travolta and Ethan Hawke called A Valley of Violence, which I've got to admit I didn't even know about until Kaz pointed it out to me. He's a bit of a Western fan, though. But the big release this week is obviously Doctor Strange, which is available in both 2D and 3D. And actually, I have to say, I saw it at the cinema in 2D because I have a general rule I won't go and see a film in 3D unless it's shot with 3D cameras. This is a post-conversion. However, whilst watching it, I thought there's some seriously trippy visuals in this, and I bet they look amazing in 3D. So I did actually buy the 3D Blu-ray. Hopefully this weekend I'll get a chance to watch it in 3D to see whether that does pay off. But I thought it was quite a good movie. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought Benedict Cumberbatch was a good choice for Doctor Strange, although his American accent's a bit iffy. I wish he'd just done it with an English accent. It's got an interesting cast. Tilda Swinton's very good in it as well. It's quite an eclectic cast. As I say, it's got some very trippy visuals. It does a pretty good origin story, but it also expands the Marvel universe to include what effectively is magic, mysticism. I thought it was a fun movie, and I'm looking forward to watching it a second time.
Okay, cool. I might even pick that up on disc. The other one I was going to pick up is Arrival, Steve. You've got the UHD version. Kazi just reviewed the UHD version, and reading between the lines, it's a very faithful disc in terms of how it should look, but there's no advantage to having it on UHD.
Yeah, no, this was an interesting one because, like you say, Kazi just reviewed it. I watched it last weekend with Laura. Now, I started watching the Ultra HD Blu-ray, and I actually had to stop after 10 minutes and slot in the Blu-ray. This is using the projector. This film has been deliberately shot, as the director himself said, I wanted to look like a wet Tuesday afternoon, a dull, wet Tuesday afternoon. And that's the way it's been designed. Now, you've both seen it at the cinema, so we can testify to the fact that it is designed that way. It is a very dark film. It's very dimly lit a lot of the time. There's a lot of interiors that are very dimly lit. Even the exteriors often are overcast and dim. There's very little colour in the film. There are occasional flashes of colour that really stand out because of that. But it is a very muted colour palette. The blacks are quite, kind of grey, aren't they, Phil? They're not. It doesn't
Charcoal.
have deep.
Charcoal black, really. Not a lot of shadow detail in there, which is again is deliberate, and it's supposed to look like a certain grade of film that films used to be shot on in the 70s, and really cheap looking black level.
Yeah, and so this is all a very deliberate decision on the part of the cinematographer and the director. And what they've done when they graded it for Blu-ray and for Ultra HD Blu-ray is that they've really pushed it in Ultra HD Blu-ray in terms of they wanted those dark. They sort of tried to push the darkness, detail within the darkness as much as they could, but also have the very bright sequences when they're actually meeting the aliens with that kind of bright wall. That was meant, and the idea I think was that mankind comes out of the darkness and into the light through their exposure to the aliens and what they learn. And so this is all part of the design. Unfortunately, it does not translate very well. I think people looking for a demo disc are going to be very disappointed because that is not what this is going to be. The Ultra HD Blu-ray in particular, I think, if you're watching it on a projector, you're going to find you're going to struggle. You're going to have to go to the Blu-ray, and even then, it's still pretty dim. Watching it on the Sony, on the TV, was a different experience. And I think this is a film definitely where if you think you've just watching it on a projector, you might be better off just going for the Blu-ray rather than the Ultra HD Blu-ray, because of the way it's designed. And unfortunately, it was a little bit disappointing in that sense. I mean, Laura actually said she found the film fascinating, but she struggled with the way it's presented visually, and said it actually detracted from enjoyment to a degree, which is an interesting thing for someone to say about a film. So I can't necessarily agree with the director's choices, but they are quite deliberate. I
absolutely loved the look when I saw it at the cinema, and I've got to say that my cinema is really up to date. It's only maybe 5 years old, maybe a little bit older than that, but it has the latest kit in it, and it's really well looked after, and the presentations are spot on. So I will add that caveat in there, because I'm sure I know there's really bad cinemas out there the majority of the time. So when I saw it projected digitally at the cinema, I actually really liked the look. I thought it was really well done. It was really different to all the science stuff that you get these days. If you notice, Hollywood has a love affair with cyan in the blacks and so on, and the way that a lot of films are graded that way, whereas this was completely different, and I liked it because of that. But like you say, I mean, watching it on a projector, I think the Blu-ray's going to be the way to go with that, because it'll have a lighter grade than the UHD disc will have. So interesting.
It was interesting watching the extras, funnily enough, because there was a sequence. The sequence where she's explaining how to interpret language by writing on that whiteboard. Yeah. I had to phrase a question and understanding it. They actually showed that sequence initially as shot, and then they sort of wiped across to how it looks in the film when they were talking about the look of the film. And you can see how much they how much dimmer and how much they bring down when they graded it, how much they brought down the light levels in the scene for this interior sequence. So it is a deliberate choice, and you can see that the black bars are nice and pitch black. So it's nothing to do with the transfer. It is a creative decision by the director, whether you agree with it or not. That's what it's supposed to look like.
Yeah. And I guess for people like us who are always saying, "Oh, come on, Hollywood, do something a little bit different," this is a little bit different. So let's not slag it off.
Well, no, I'm not slagging it off so much as I'm just saying I think it will be divisive. I think it will be.
Yeah, totally. It will, because I mean, you just have to look at the forums and the users that we have on the forums, and there's this debate about grain, and this is very much the same way. It's designed to look a certain way, and I can see a lot of people not liking it.
I mean, it was an interesting weekend in a sense, because I watched that, and that was an interesting experience. I then watched Hacksaw Ridge, which I've got to say, compared to the Blu-ray, it was a vastly superior experience in HDR, and a great-looking picture with a absolutely fantastic Dolby Atmos soundtrack, especially during the battle sequences. In fact, in the extras, Mel Gibson mentions screening the film for veterans, and he said that the thing that caused them to react the most was not the violence on screen. It was the sound of bullets whizzing over their heads with the Atmos speakers overhead that immediately took them back to being in action. And that was the thing that triggered their memories. And I can vouch for I've never been in a war, thankfully, but certainly felt very realistic watching it. And the other film I watched, and this was a very interesting experience, not in a positive way, was Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk.
Right. Which I was really interested in what you think of this.
Yeah. It's shot at 4K. And it's been HDR graded, and the image, in terms of the level of detail on show, is quite staggering. But that 60 frames a second makes it look like video. This does not look like film. And the interesting thing is, it did exactly the same thing that happened when we saw The Hobbit at 48 frames a second. Suddenly, the performances seem fake and like actors, and there's something unnatural about it. Even though this has this sort of unnatural reality to it in terms of the resolution and the motion handling, the performances suffer. Steve Martin and Vin Diesel just seem really fake. Watching those same scenes again at 24p on the regular Blu-ray, completely different experience. So it does have not only does it look like video, but it has a negative impact, I think, on the film itself.
The Hobbit for me, and the whole reason it fell down for me was it felt like a stage play. certainly the scenes at the beginning of the film where they all turn up at Bilbo's house and they have the party and the song, and it just that took me completely out of the picture, completely out, because it felt like a stage play. It didn't feel like film. It didn't feel natural, and I know there's a lot of debate in terms of technically and the image in terms of detail and resolution and so on. I am sure it looks absolutely stunning. It's just something about that motion. And I agree totally with you with the stuff that I have seen at higher frame rates. If it's drama or film, it just does not translate at all.
But it's just interesting the way that it seems to affect how you perceive the performances in the film, because they felt so different watching them. And I think in The Hobbit was the same. People weren't laughing at jokes in The Hobbit that I found funny watching it at 24p, but I didn't find funny at 48p because for some reason I just was being taken out of the experience. So it was an interesting experience. Hopefully people won't be using it anymore.
I think, Steve, given our ages and the fact that we've grown up on this stuff, and if you look at who is working in Hollywood at the minute and what they are saying in terms of filmmaking and so on, there's nobody supporting this technology when it comes to drama and filmmaking and so on. So I think we're safe for our lifetime. That we're going to get the odd experiment and so on. I think for the younger generations coming through, those that are used to 60 frame gaming and so on, and that look and that flow, and as video improves, and I've got to say I'm a big fan of high frame rate for video. That's where it works. So when I mean for video, what I mean is sports coverage, sports football, coverage, that kind of thing, basketball, baseball. That's where it will really make a big difference, because that is realistic, it's realism, it's the real world, and on video it works that way. When you're talking about drama and trying to take people away to another world or so on, there's just something about 24 frames a second that make that work, and if you try and up the frame rate, it takes you out of the experience. But for other things, I'm a big pusher of higher frame rate for sport and so on. That's where I think it'll make a big difference. And even stuff like Britain's Got Talent and all that kind of thing, you can really up the image quality there with a higher frame rate, and it won't look odd doing it that way. But I think for drama and certainly film, there's just something about it that just doesn't work. And anybody else here seen higher frame rate stuff? Mark or Ed?
I've only seen sort of test stuff. I didn't go and see The Hobbit, full stop. In fact, I still haven't seen The Hobbit in any frame rate. I broadly echo what you're saying there. I think there are some caveats. We've discussed this before. Things like stop motion and animations and things like that, they could potentially be quite a fruitful area for this sort of technology. But if you are filming real people in real situations, there's an argument that there's a lack of it looking like we expect it to look. Now, I mean, it's an equally valid argument that this is a sort of traditionalism that we don't necessarily countenance with other aspects of technology, but we seem to be there seems to be an agreement that thus far efforts to do it in different ways does end up looking a bit weird. So
for film. And
yes.
This is what we really need to push forward. We are talking about film here. We're not talking about and to a certain extent TV dramas. Everything else I think would benefit from higher frame rates. We do it ourselves with our videos, so we've gone from shooting at 25, our CES videos were shot at 60 because it makes it look cleaner. You get more detail there when you're looking at objects like products and stuff. You can see more detail, and when you're moving the camera, you're not getting any motion blur. So for stuff like that, it absolutely works. News, absolutely. Sport, it'll look brilliant. The only areas really where it doesn't work, and the experiments so far have shown that, is with film, with drama.
The only comparison I've got is watching sport, really. I've not seen ultra high frame rate, but I've seen quite a lot of American sports at 59.94, 60 frames per second effectively, and it's a massive upgrade on the 25 frames per second we get for the likes of Match of the Day. It just makes a huge difference to sport. Just the clarity of it all, really, and the lifelike quality. It kind of does the opposite as it does with film, really. It makes it more real, whereas somehow with film it seems to detract.
Yeah, and I think we're coming back to the video look, the soap opera look, as it's been called for many years, and that's the big thing when it comes to film. It doesn't suit it, and it takes you out of the performance. For some strange reason, it does that, and until I think they nail that aspect, I don't think it'll ever move over to film anyway. Mr. Botwright, you got anything to add to this? Seeing as you're a gamer, and obviously I am assuming that you enjoy gaming at higher frame rates.
Well, yeah, obviously, generally higher frame rate is better. Although certainly with gaming, it tends to be, as long as you can keep it a kind of stable frame rate, that's good. And there are certain issues around things like frame pacing. But yeah, higher frame rate for gaming is always preferable. And once you've played a game that's locked at a solid 60 frames per second, it's very hard to go back to 30. It just creates that kind of smooth experience. It feels like almost feels like there's less input lag there. It feels like moves and animations and things are more connected. But I can certainly understand why it's an issue for film. It's one of those things, though. I do wonder whether it's a case of, is it just purely acclimatization? Is it the fact that it jars with what we've seen that comes before? And
I hope certainly from my point of view that I went in with an open mind when I went to see The Hobbit. I genuinely was interested in seeing how it would work, and the thing for me wasn't necessarily the motion. It was the fact that what Steve's already alluded to is that it just takes you out of the experience. It looks odd, and I don't think it's about acclimatizing to it. I just think it just looks unnatural, and it gives you that unnatural feeling to what you're watching.
No, I think that's all perfectly fair. I just, I would still wonder whether it is a case of it looks unnatural, and that is a question of it looks odd because it's different to the norm, and so therefore it still is in a way acclimatization. So if younger people grew up more with consuming media through phones, through tablets and the like, and they're viewing things YouTube or whatever with higher frame rates, at some point will they be simply more receptive to this, and they won't have that certain moment where all of a sudden they say, oh, something looks strange here, in the same way that perhaps they might not with films or something that doesn't have grain. For people of a certain generation, seeing anything shot digitally without grain was a kind of bucket of cold water in the face, whereas for a lot of young people that's not even a consideration anymore.
Yeah, true. And the thing with these frame interpolation systems that are on TVs, I mean, I've been in people's houses where they have had it switched on, and I can notice it straight away. Yeah. Whereas they're oblivious to it. And when you say something, they're like, "Oh, it looks fine to me."
Just wait till they leave the room and just change it. That's why.
But you see, I think what we're coming on to here is that we need to find a good way of testing this. So I'm going to propose the Danny Dyer test. How natural is Danny Dyer in EastEnders compared to his films?
I still think he should be the next Doctor Who.
I think that's fair enough.
Danny Dyer.
Daleks.
Yeah, look at his Dalek. What a muppet.
I thought we wanted him to be James Bond. I thought that's what we were pushing for.
He can do.
No, I want him to do everything. Can we be clear about this?
He can play all things.
Any male and some female roles should all be done by Danny Dyer.
Remake of Gandhi, Danny Dyer.
Yeah.
Did you see his Who Do You Think You Are?
No.
Oh.
Is it related to royalty or something?
Yes.
Every second or something.
Yeah.
I just find that he's just... there's a complete lack of artifice to Danny Dyer that I think is just fantastic. And never forget that Danny Dyer made a film which made £17 at the UK box office.
And I think I interviewed him about that one of them films. He's been on the podcast twice, so there you go. We've had him on the AVForums.
So he's one of our own. I just think we've tried different flavours of Doctor. It's time for a less cerebral Doctor Who, shall we say?
Well, what about the argument?
More of a doer than a thinker.
What about the argument that has come from certain sectors that the next Doctor should be female?
I don't have a problem with that, but I'd still rather have Danny Dyer.
Because there's no reason why Time Lord couldn't regenerate a woman. I think that's been established that's possible. And I think that people have mentioned, I don't think she'd do it because she's far too big a star and busy, but Tilda Swinton would be a great choice because she's sort of androgynous and slightly strange and alien looking at the best of times. And so, would probably be an excellent Doctor Who.
Well, the other person that was nominated that I thought could also be excellent because she's also quite odd is Eva Green.
Yes, and also very saucy, so that would brighten up my Saturday evenings.
I don't know. It's one of those things. There's no mystery to Eva Green.
We've had this conversation before. I've seen it all from the Dreamers on.
Dreamers, and it's like, but to each their own and all that. But no, I mean, I was more thinking that Tim Burton thing that she was in, where I believe she kept her clothes on all the way through, but she was also quite.
You mean Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar?
Yeah, quite effectively odd all the way through it, quirky. So, yes.
So that's high frame rate covered.
We haven't spoken about Danny Dyer in a couple of podcasts, and as one of our greatest living Englishmen, I felt that it was, only fair to bring him back up for this one.
No, I quite agree.
But yes.
So we've decided we're talking about Danny Dyer, and the fact that DVD is now 20 years old this month is just, we'll forget about that. But yes, it is. It's 20 years old this month. The most successful consumer electronics product ever.
Yes,
DVD.
no format war. Isn't that amazing? Look what happens.
Exactly. I can remember my first DVD purchase and player. I know Steve can because he's encyclopedia mind that way. Ed, can you remember what your first one was?
Player was a NAD T550.
It would be.
Which was an LG in a smart box. Well, a big grey box actually. My first Blu-ray. Bear in mind, my wife had.
We're not talking about Blu-ray. We're talking about DVD.
Player. Oh, sorry. But first DVD that I purchased was Pitch Black. Actually, the Vin Diesel thing.
Okay. Mine was a Panasonic A360 multi-regioned, and the first disc was Matrix.
Oh, I don't know what the model was, but it was a big Sony Silver Beast that was built like an absolute tank. So big the controller had a jog wheel on it as well.
Did it have a blue horizontal light on the front panel?
No, I don't remember that. Might have done. There was a lot going on.
9000 had that. I can't remember.
Yeah, I think that was it.
That was a hell of a thing, and there was also a matching power amp and processor for it. That spec-wise, it was hopeless, but it was just for those of us that get unnaturally excited about control knobs, that was Premier League.
Actually, thinking about it, I think the remote that came with my Panasonic had a jog wheel on it as well. I think it was a big thing with the first DVD.
Yeah, they used to have lots of them on the front of the players as well, and on the controllers. And I had that one chipped as well. Back in the days before remote hacks, that seemed like a massive thing. That was absolutely huge for me. I think DVD just opened up a world of possibilities with regards importing things that would never come out in the UK. I got so many things like that.
Well, that really carried over from Laserdisc. So those of us that collected Laserdisc, we had no choice but to import stuff. So when it came to DVD, you were always going to get the better releases in the States. So my first few DVD players were all chipped because I bought the vast majority of stuff from the US. It's funny how that's turned around now, and that's no longer the case. Release windows are a lot shorter than they used to be, and there's only the odd occasion now where you get a disc released in the States before it comes out in the cinema here. I think nowadays it's almost on a parity, isn't it? So, but that was a big thing, having your player chipped. Mr. Hodge?
You didn't need it for mine. I just remember it had a multi-region process, which was a quick 78-stage procedure with the remote. Would just change it to whichever region you needed at the time. It was arduous. I never committed it to memory.
Oh, sorry. I'm not sure, but I think it was a Sony. I can't remember the model number, and I bought it with a receiver at the same time. And in terms of my first disc, I bought about 5 at once, but one of them was a Led Zeppelin DVD that had some concerts from some of the best concerts and some rare footage. And I can remember upsetting my neighbours by falling asleep on the remote control at about 3 a.m. with that pumped up really, really loud through a 5.1 system. And I got some annoyed neighbours coming around. They couldn't even wake me up. So it went on till about 5 a.m.
So when you say falling asleep, that sounds a lot like passed out.
Yeah, it was about 3 a.m. I got a bit ambitious, should we say, heavily ambitious, and then I fell asleep, and I must have just fallen on the volume control and pushed it up.
Were you tired and emotional?
I think I was by that stage, yeah.
Can I just say...
Not long after I bought my first decent headphones.
Can I just say that my wife bought, and I think this needs to be mentioned as possibly one of the most important AV products of all time, certainly in the UK. She had a Wharfdale DVD 750, which were the ones being sold in Tesco's for under 200 quid. And was the one that was when I saw those on sale in Tesco's, I knew that the format had achieved proper mainstream status and it was going to be with us for some time to come.
I had 4 of those and returned every one because none of them would work properly.
This one actually proved pretty reliable. I mean, don't get me wrong, it made a noise like it had some sort of reciprocating engine to rotate the disc and so on and so forth. But nonetheless, as a means, let's not forget that a number of people got into DVD because unlike VHS, they didn't have to rewind them when they were done. Let's ignore some of the obvious advantages in picture and so on and so forth. It brought the convenience of DVD to a whole new group of people, and it undoubtedly helped the adoption of the format.
I don't think you can ignore the picture side of it. The picture side of it was the big reason that people upgraded. It was such a step on from VHS. Let's ignore Laserdisc because Laserdisc was a niche. But it was such a step up in quality. The first time I saw DVD, I knew my Laserdisc collection was done for.
Yeah, me too.
And I resisted for 2 years. I said, nope, I'm going to stick with Laserdisc. But it was just such a big step up. And the problem that we've had with Blu-ray and then UHD Blu-ray is that there is no huge step up. It's diminishing returns, really, unless you've got a really massive screen. So the jump from DVD to Blu-ray wasn't as significant as it was DVD to VHS. I mean, that was just such a big step up, and it was futuristic, and it was at the time it was a CD-sized disc that you could get a film on with that kind of quality. It was mind-blowing at the time. I can remember just being staggered with it, and I'd experimented with CDR and what was the formats that came before that, and it was VCD, and it was all pixelated crap, and it looked terrible, and yet DVD was just phenomenal when it came to picture quality. It was, and I think that's the reason it was such a success, and I still think it's the reason why it's such a success nowadays. It's because cost-wise, it's so cheap. It's so cheap to produce. It's so cheap to buy, and there's still a lot of things on DVD that will never turn up on Blu-ray.
I was going to say, I've still got so many discs now that they're not even great picture quality, but it was just all of a sudden you could grab something that had only been released, some obscure title in like Singapore or something that's got terrible subtitles, but it wasn't available to you before, and it's not available again.
I still cry. I mean, Laserdisc was expensive. There's no getting around that you were paying £200, £250 for box sets and that kind of thing. The thing with DVD was it was so much cheaper. So much cheaper. I mean, even 20 quid for a disc when you're paying 50 for a Laserdisc. That for our side of things, the home cinema side of things, that was a big thing as well, and all the extras that came with it, and they really made an effort with that as well. Through CD Japan, they took mortgage payments from me, the size of mortgage payments from me, because I imported lots of Armageddon DTS. It was only available in Japan. And that was, I think it was about 70 quid to import that. And there was a few other discs. One was Black Hawk Down in DTS. It was a 3-disc set. It came with a soundtrack CD as well. Again, I had to track that down. I think that might have been either Korean or Brazilian. I can't quite remember. But yeah, you were going out your way to buy these things, and that was a big pusher in the early days of AVForums. The film section and the DVD section, and buying these discs and finding out about these releases and going out and get them. Another one that was a huge release on DVD was Master and Commander. The soundtrack on that was phenomenal. We'd never had anything like that in the home. So yeah, I mean, 20 years old, and we wouldn't be where we are now without DVD.
My first player was the Toshiba SD 2006, which came out in March 1997. I bought it from the States. And my first disc was the Sony release of In the Line of Fire. I also had a friend who lived in America, and Warner's were only selling their discs through certain retailers in 7 US cities. So one of them was New York. So I got a friend in New York to buy a number of those discs and post them over to me. But the first one that I got my hands on was In Line of Fire. As soon as I put it on and watched it in anamorphic, an anamorphic DVD on my widescreen TV, I knew that my Laserdisc collection's days were numbered.
Yeah.
But the good news was they were considerably cheaper than Laserdiscs.
Yeah, I mean that was the big thing. I mean, there was a lot of people saying, "Oh, 20 quid, that's expensive." Not if you were a Laserdisc collector.
Nope.
That was budget.
And obviously a lot smaller too, a lot more convenient. I mean, the reasons they were so successful, as you guys have said, it was convenient, it was small, it was easy. The picture quality was vastly superior to VHS. Also had Dolby Digital, of course, and then later DTS. But then there were things like commentary tracks and the extras and deleted scenes. I mean, everything that obviously those things were being done to a degree on Laserdisc. But as you said, Phil, there was a very niche market in terms of the wide mass market acceptance of the things we now take for granted. All that came from DVD. I'd forgotten because I was reading about it on the Digital Bits. They were doing a thing about 20th anniversary, and I was reading, and I thought I'd forgotten that it was a few years. I think it was over 2 years before many of the major studios actually got behind DVD. So people like Disney. I mean, no surprise there because they are currently supporting Ultra HD Blu-ray. But Disney and Fox and quite a few studios weren't supporting the format with titles until after the DIVX thing had crashed. Thank God. So that was quite a few, and obviously it wasn't until 2001 that we finally got the first Star Wars DVD with Phantom Menace. So that was
it took a long time for a lot of studios like that to come in, but once they did, I mean, that was it. The floodgates opened, and you've got stuff on DVD now that you will never see on Blu-ray and that kind of thing. So happy birthday, DVD. It's 20 years old this month, and like I say, I don't think any of us would be where we are now if it wasn't for that format or doing the things that we do, apart from probably Ed, who was into vinyl.
So I'm ploughing my own furrow, so to speak.
Someone's got to.
And on that bombshell, that's it for the AVForums podcast this week. My thanks to Steve Withers.
It wasn't the airplanes, it was beauty killed the beast.
Mark Hodgkinson.
Chuck everything except for the potatoes.
Ed Selley.
It's in the subtext.
And Mark Botwright.
It was pure effluence.
Amen.
Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, bookmark AVForums for latest reviews, news and videos, and of course leave us those 5-star ratings on iTunes, but only if you enjoyed the show. I'm Phil Hinton, thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you again next week. No, we won't. We won't see you next week because we're taking our half-term holiday next week. So apologies, but there's no podcast next week. So that's it. I'm Phil Hinton. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you again next week. No, we won't. No! Stop.
Are you sure?
I'm Ron Burgundy.
Go yourself, AVForums.
You know what I say. See you later.
Laters.